The upcoming Senate impeachment trial was all the talk on the Sunday morning shows. House Democrats and members of the president's legal team provided a preview of the arguments we can expect to hear. Here's what you may have missed.
The only thing really new about the president's defense is that they're now arguing, I think because they can't contest the facts, that the president cannot be impeached for abusing the power of his office.
That's what I wanted to get to, because that's the argument. Alan Dershowitz is coming up, and that's the argument he's going to make. He says, quote, abuse of power, even if proved, is not an impeachable offense.
Well, that's the argument I suppose you have to make if the facts are so dead set against you. If the president has admitted to the wrongdoing, his chief of staff has confessed to the wrongdoing, his European Union ambassador has confessed to the same quid pro quo, you have to rely on an argument that even if he abused his office in this horrendous way, that it's not impeachable. You had to go so far out of the mainstream to find someone to make that argument. You had to leave the realm of constitutional law scholars and go to criminal defense lawyers.
As you know, the House materials have cited crimes that were committed as well.
But they weren't elements. They are not articles of impeachment. But the articles of impeachment are two non-criminal actions, namely obstruction of Congress and abuse of power. And those are what have to be voted on by the Senate.
Let me press that, though. Is it your position that President Trump should not be impeached, even if all the evidence and arguments laid out by the House are accepted as fact?
That's right. When you have somebody who, for example, is indicted for a crime, let's assume you have a lot of evidence, but the grand jury simply indicts for something that's not a crime, and that's what happened here. You have a lot of evidence, disputed evidence, could go both ways, but the vote was to impeach on abuse of power, which is not within the constitutional criteria for impeachment, and obstruction of Congress.
In the House, they did this in 48 days. They never allowed the president to exercise executive privilege, and when he suggested he might, they impeached him for obstructing Congress. Now, I'd like you to ask Mr. Jeffries the following. What are we supposed to do in the Senate regarding executive privilege? If it's going to be invoked, who determines whether or not the privilege applies? Clearly, to me, any president would ask for executive privilege regarding these witnesses. And if they were that important, why didn't you call them in the House? Do you need them to make your case? Well, what they're doing here is they've got a railroad job in the House, and they're trying to fix it in the Senate, and I'm not going to be part of that.
Okay, Susan Page is D.C. bureau chief for USA Today, and she joins me now from Washington. Susan, Republicans, some of them seem divided over witnesses. Senior White House officials are telling us at CBS News they expect 4 GOP senators will vote to call witnesses: Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Mitt Romney, and Cory Gardner. What kind of pressure are they under?
Well, what do those senators have in common? That they're running for re-election, and they from states that tend to be kind of purple, not reliably red states. And so those are the senators, with the exception of Mitt Romney, who is also a possible vote in that direction and not running for re-election. Those are the senators who I think feel the most political pressure to make sure it looks like they're holding a fair trial that fully explores these articles of impeachment before they vote one way or another on whether to convict the president. I don't think it is a sure thing that the Democrats will manage to convince 4 Republicans to go along with them. And just one other note, that only works if you get all the Democrats to stay with you. There are at least a couple of Democrats, like Joe Manchin from West Virginia, who might potentially be inclined to at least hear the president's arguments on this front. I think this is now an unsettled issue, whether we'll end up hearing from witnesses in the Senate trial.
Now, but how does the level of partisanship that we're seeing during this impeachment of President Trump compare to what we saw during the Clinton era?
You know, I covered the Clinton impeachment. Who knew we would look back and see that as kind of a golden moment of bipartisanship? Because it seemed pretty partisan at the time. But you look back and it was a considerably more cooperative moment than the moment we have now. Remember, the Senate at that point voted 100-0 approving the rules for the trial. And in this case, we have obviously a fierce partisan divide, even on setting the rules. And in fact, Democrats say at this point, they don't even know what the rules are going to be. So even for all the fierceness of the Clinton impeachment, this is more partisan than that ever was.
The outcome of this trial is almost a foregone conclusion. And President Trump is actually campaigning on impeachment at his rallies. He mentions it, in the White House when LSU is there. What is the motivation for Democrats to continue with this?
So first of all, I'd say that the conventional wisdom is he's going to be the president will not be convicted and removed from office. I would just note that sometimes unexpected things happen, and one reason Democrats would like to call witnesses and would like to have this trial go on for a while is to have an opportunity for unexpected things to happen that would make that not the foregone conclusion. But even if the president is not convicted, even if he is acquitted by the Senate, which is the more likely outcome, a couple things that Democrats might be looking at. One, Democrats argue they had a constitutional obligation to pursue this, a substantive obligation. If you look at the politics, it's probably not, at the end of the day, the first thing the president wanted to have happen to him to be impeached and have a Senate trial. It also puts these Republican senators from swing states who are up for re-election in November on the spot in ways that are probably not helpful to them.
More evidence has also come to light in the weeks since the House voted to impeach the president. It seems like Democrats have more information now with which to kind of build their case against the president. Do you think that they maybe made a mistake by kind of pushing this through the House? Should they have waited longer?
A lot of criticism of Democrats for not taking a little more time, for not going through the courts to try to force more witnesses, for not waiting for things like LeVar Parnas to step forward with information that would be useful. If you talk to House Democrats about that, though, they say that they were in a difficult spot because court challenges take a lot of time, because they didn't want this to stretch on through well into next year. They point out that there's an election coming up, and that at that point, the impeachment of the president may be moot. So they argue there were reasons that they had what was amounted to a really quick investigation once the Ukraine allegations came to light. But it is definitely true that that's one of the criticisms being leveled. So, you know, the senator from Maine, Susan Collins, who is one of those targeted Republican senators in hopes of getting her to vote in favor of witnesses, makes that point. If it's so important for the Democrats, why didn't they take more time on the House side?
This is also the first time a U.S. president is facing impeachment during re-election. How is the 2020 race altering this process when compared with previous impeachments?
You know, we've never had an impeachment before with a president running for re-election. So this is a new experience. One thing that may turn out to be remarkable, for all the importance of this moment, for the seriousness of it, only the third time in our entire history that a president has been faced a Senate trial on his impeachment. I think at the end of the day, maybe it doesn't matter much in November. You know, people have made up their minds about President Trump. They either think he has very strong supporters, he has very strong opponents. And one thing we've seen for the past 3 years, nothing seems to move that allegiance one way or the other. So I wonder if at the end of the day, people once again will vote on issues like the economy and health care and education.
And this is a question that's kind of raising some eyebrows. The Senate has imposed some harsh restrictions on media coverage of the trial. What is Mitch McConnell trying to accomplish? It's not just the media, but also members that are going to be in there.
Yeah. You know, I view this as a reporter with great concern, because one of the great things about covering Congress is that you can talk to members, that you can grab them as they're walking through a hallway, you can interview them as they go along. It's one of the ways in which we find out what is going on, in which we represent the questions from their constituents. And the rules that are proposed by the senators, by Senator McConnell, very much restrict where reporters can go, prevent a reporter from walking down a hallway and talking to a senator, even if it's okay with the senator. So I view this with great concern. Protests have been lodged by the Standing Committee of Correspondence, which represents all of us reporters there on Capitol Hill, and we're hoping that Senator McConnell will reconsider. And
one more quick bonus question. This impeachment trial, is this going to be more of a campaign ad for Republicans or Democrats in the election?
Well, it's helped the president raise money so far. We know it's been a boon for him in terms of campaign fundraising. You know, I think at the end of the day, for Democrats, this is not going to be in their ads. I think they're going to focus, as they did in 2018 in those successful midterm elections, on health care and the issues that matter in people's personal lives.
Susan Page in Washington, D.C., thank you very much.
Thank you.